the fitrah then, you can say it's like the heart of the soul, or I also like to say, and again, all of this is like theories that we can't really prove. It's just my own interpretation after thinking about this topic for quite literally 20 years, so I have my own views and phrasing to say it. One way I would like to phrase it, and it's a theory, Allah knows ilm al-ghayb, this is ilm al-ghayb, Allah knows that reality. The fitrah is the intellect of the ruh. And I like that better than saying the fitrah is the qalb of the ruh. Why do I say this? Because, listen to this carefully, there are people who are alive physically, but mentally and spiritually they're not normal. They're on the abnormal scale. So they have a ruh, but they don't have cognitive function. What does that mean about their fitrah? Most likely they also don't have a fitrah. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Mentally challenged people, right? They're physically alive and also they're living bodies, but they're not mentally normal. So what does that mean about their intellect? It's not normal. What does that mean about their fitrah? Also most likely not normal. They're just not there fully. So the soul can be there without the brain of the soul, just like the body can be there without the brain functioning and the body is there. You guys following me, right? The default, your body has a qalb and a brain. Similarly, the default, the ruh, also has the fitrah embedded in it. But it is possible in exceptional cases to have the soul without the ruh, just like you can have the body without a functioning brain or normal brain. Is that clear? Right? So I like to think of the fitrah as the brains, the cognitive function of the ruh. And we're going to come back to this point. So understand, therefore, the fitrah is not a passive faculty. The fitrah has an independent thought process other than the brain. So we have two mechanisms of thinking. We have the intellectual thought, and then we have an intuition. We have a gut instinct of right and wrong. We have something that transcends the intellect, something that it's visceral to us, it's deeply embedded in us. An intuition that knows something is right or something is wrong. Where does that intuition come from? That is the brains of the ruh, that is the fitrah. Is that clear? Right? So that's the definitions here. Okay, so some more facts about the fitrah. And this is stuff that is relatively difficult to find in books, the way that I'm presenting it, because this is research that I myself have done. Of course, I'm not saying it doesn't exist elsewhere, but the way that it's being collated and collected and being presented to you, generally speaking, I don't think you'd find it in this type of mechanism, because this is a topic that I myself did as a part of my PhD, and I'm still writing papers on it. FYI, I just had a paper proposal accepted to a book that's going to be coming out from Cambridge, and it's going to be about Ibn Taymiyyah's epistemological role of the fitrah. So I'm going to be elaborating even more in this regard. So this is like, inshallah, stuff that you might not find in this simple matter in other lectures or writings. So, some more information about the fitrah. We proved the fitrah exists via the Quran and Sunnah. Correct? Everybody correct? Right? Yes? Okay. I'm not going to quiz you. You should all know. How many verses reference the fitrah? How many verses reference the fitrah? 0? La ilaha illallah. It's literally in the Quran. Fitrat Allahi allati fatara an-nasa alayha is but one. There are others that are indirect, but this is the most explicit. So when I say how many verses, the intelligent should have asked, do you mean explicit or implicit? If explicit, then 1. If implicit, well then the sky is the limit. There's a lot of concepts that the Quran mentions. Okay? And hadith as well. There are many hadith about the fitrah. Okay. Question. Can we infer the existence of the fitrah outside of the Quran and Sunnah? If we didn't have the Quran and Sunnah, are there other indications that the fitrah exists? Do you understand the question? Let's remove the sacred texts. Can we infer the existence of the fitrah via observed, lived, experiential reality? Yes or no? Sisters are very silent. Make a judgment. If you're right or wrong, at least show some confidence. Yes. Majority say yes. Brothers? Yes. Okay. Yes, it is the correct answer. Yes. How do we prove the existence of the fitrah outside of the Quran and Sunnah? I will give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Not exhaustive, but 7 points. I'll give you 7 points. Number 1. The historical and biological reality that mankind as a whole believes in that which is beyond the physical realm. Religiosity, spirituality, belief in a higher power. All societies pre-modernity, without exception, have been religious societies. Every single one of them. We're going to come to this later on in our class. Atheism is a very, very modern phenomenon. By very modern, I mean the last 150 years old. No human being before 150 years ago was an avowed atheist the way that we understand atheism. Atheism, a rejection in the belief of a higher power, simply did not exist in pre-modernity. I know it sounds confusing to many of you. We're going to come back to this point here. All societies, all intellectuals, all humans affirm belief in a higher power or more than one higher power. All civilizations had religion. The fact that there is religion, even though the world doesn't necessarily need religion, indicates there is something that is beyond the material. So, a natural belief in a higher power. Biologically, scientists, psychologists have proven that children are born predisposed to believe in the existence of a higher power. This is something that multiple child psychologists have demonstrated and shown, that children innately believe that there is a higher being. Call it Allah, call it God, call it Jesus, whatever you want to call it. But the notion of a creator is embedded even in children that are raised in irreligious, non-religious households. Where does it come from? The fitrah. Number 2, the fact that we are not just a conglomerate collection of atoms and of chemical reactions, that we desire to know the truth, that we wish to search for meaning in our lives. And even, Plato and Aristotle, they talk about this reality. Aristotle has the notion of man having a telos. There's an end goal. You want to know your place in society. You want to know your place in the world. What are we doing here? What is being? One of the common questions of Western, Western philosophy is, what does it mean to be, right? When Shakespeare asks to be or not to be, he's actually kind of getting to this point here. What does it mean to exist? What is the meaning? Now, question. If we were simply biological accidents, why are we concerned about the meaning of life rather than just being concerned about living? The fact that we are getting involved in the metaphysical, desiring truth, wanting to know reality, where is this coming from? It is the fitrah's yearning to discover and be discovered. It is the fitrah's mind's curiosity, right? The soul's minds, I should say. The soul wants to discover, why is it here? And that is the yearning. Number 3, to live life beyond materialism. So number 2 is to search for higher meaning. And number 3, to accomplish in one's life more than just physical happiness. Once you reach a certain age, in fact, frankly, even teenagers, but I mean, it's understandable. Teenagers, maybe it's difficult for them to move beyond, when they're 14, 15, 16, they're just interested in, having fun and TikTok videos, whatever it might be. But the reality is, even at that stage, intelligent amongst them, and definitely when you become older, every human being without exception aspires to achieve something more than just mere banality of existence. Nobody just wants to live and eat and sleep and procreate and have fun, after a while, that becomes meaningless and boring. And you want to do something bigger. But if you were just a biological accident, why? So yearning not just for answers, but for actual nobility in existence, it is a manifestation of the fitrah. Number four, the soul's need to be nourished and sustained and paid attention. Ibn Taymiyyah writes, the nourishment of the soul is more important for human happiness than the nourishment of the body. That's very profound. The nourishment of the soul is more important for satisfaction in life than the nourishment of the body. Because even if the body is not fed, but the soul is fed, the soul will feel accomplished. Simple reality of Ramadan and fasting in Ramadan. And when the body is fed, but the soul is not fed, then the soul does not have purpose and meaning in existence. So, the reality of the soul wanting to be nourished and sustained, number 4. Number 5, a manifestation of the existence of the fitrah, basic, universal, general, agreed upon morality. Why does mankind from east to west understand that elderly parents, once they cease to be of functional use to society, should not just be discarded and left at the side of the road? There is a universal sense of obligation to take care of. Why does society universally acknowledge that stealing is wrong? The strong should not take from the weak, even though that is the law of the jungle. But in our humanity, it is not law in any society. Even the one who does it would not like it to be done to him, because they know this is unjust. So the broad aspects of morality are actually agreed upon. And this is referenced in the Quran. You can say this is a reference also to the fitrah indirectly. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Allah inspired the soul with the knowledge of evil and the knowledge of good. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Allah Azza wa Jal inspired the soul with the knowledge of fujur, what is evil, and taqwa, good. Everybody on earth recognizes that when you see an orphan, not related to you, no biological ties, and you are generous to that orphan, you give food to the hungry, everybody recognizes that is nobility. But why? Why? Where is that notion of this being good comes from? Everybody recognizes that lying and cheating is ignoble. Why? Where is this coming from? Universal concept of morality, agreed upon morality. This is number 5. Number 6, a corollary of number 5, and this is a profound point here, and it also goes back to number 4, but I'm rephrasing it in a different way. The feeling of spiritual satisfaction when performing acts of good, coupled with the feeling of shame when committing acts of evil. Understand this point? We all, like a mass murderer in court, the default, of course there's always exceptions to the rule, but the default is that they are embarrassed at what they've done. They don't want to be seen. How many times they catch a criminal, and even as they're walking into the court, they're going to shield their faces from the camera because they're embarrassed at having done a crime. Where does this embarrassment and shame come from? Conversely, we feel a sense of nobility and fulfillment when we do good. Why do we feel good when we do good? When we give charity, we feel a sense of accomplishment. Nobody has seen us. We're stopping at the traffic light. We see a hungry man, pull the window down, give them $5, go on. Nobody has seen us. For the rest of the day, there's a bit of happiness in our hearts. We've done something good. But why? Where did that feeling? Because what we've done is we've nourished the soul. And when we nourish the soul feels alive. Just like when we have a meal, the body feels alive. When we nourish the soul feels alive. And one can say this is in the Quran, an-nafs al-mutma'inna versus an-nafs al-lawwama. Okay, an-nafs al-mutma'inna versus an-nafs al-lawwama. So the concept, therefore, of the soul, you can also add here, the final point, similar to this, is the notion of what we call in English conscience. Conscience, having a conscience, which is something doesn't make sense if we're just a bunch of random atoms put together. So, to summarize, therefore, the existence of the fitrah is manifested in multiple levels, and it can be demonstrated that man is more than just the collection of atoms and particles. There's something about man that makes man different than animal, and it cannot be explained scientifically or biologically. And this is where the fitrah comes in. So the fitrah is manifested, one could say very simplistically, in the humanity of being human. It's what it means to be human. Because the animals don't have fitrah the way we have fitrah. The animals don't have, this is a human concept that Allah has given unto us. So, we've answered therefore the question that can the fitrah be proven to exist beyond the Quran and Sunnah? And the answer is yes, and I explained how. We now move on to the next question, and that is, okay, so the fitrah is the brains of the soul, as I said, and you have the intellectual brains of the body. So now let's get to the next question. What information does the fitrah convey that is separate and distinct from the brains of the body? And what does the brain convey that is separate and distinct from the fitrah? And what is the relationship between these two intellectual cores, the bodily intellect and the spiritual intellect? Do you understand the question? Do you understand the question? Or should I repeat the question? I am saying it appears that we have two intellectual faculties, two brains. I don't like using the term brains, but I'm being a bit simplistic here. Okay? Two faculties of tadabbur. Two faculties of cognition. Let's put it that way. Okay? The one of them is spiritual and the other is physical. Clear? Guys, why is there no ta'awun? Have you had heavy biryani now? What's going on here? Huh? It's all clear. Okay. So, my question to you then, what does the fitrah convey to us in terms of knowledge that we don't need the brain for? The physical brain. And what does the brain convey that the fitrah could not convey? And is there ever a clash? And is there ever an overlap? This is the question. It's a very difficult question. And the problem is we have to glean the answers because we don't have explicit, detailed expositions in this regard. We have to kind of sort of figure it out with the generalities that we have. So, again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to summarize for you the research I've done. I would say the fitrah conveys, at the very least, 6 distinct areas of knowledge that are deeply embedded in the psyche of man and do not need complex rational proofs to prove. The fitrah conveys at least six areas of knowledge. I'm not saying 6 facts, that's a bit too simple. 6 areas of knowledge. The first of them, transcendental meaning. Don't get confused with the words. This goes back to what I'm talking about 5 minutes ago. The yearning for a higher purpose. That curiosity comes from the fitrah, not the brain. You want to know the truth. You want to discover, what am I doing here? And that is primarily the fitrah's curiosity. The brain will follow, but it starts from the fitrah. So, transcendental meaning, a higher level of spirituality, a yearning for a noble cause. You're searching for the truth. That curiosity is coming from the fitrah. Number 2, the fitrah will give us, without the need for deep contemplation, the fact that there is a higher power that created us. The existence of God is deeply embedded in the human psyche and does not need complex proofs. This is a fundamental aspect of theology according to one school of Islam, and that is the Taymiyyah school, Ibn Taymiyyah. Other schools would not phrase it in this manner, but I am coming to you from the Taymiyyah paradigm overall in this regard, and I am a strong advocate of this. You don't need complicated proofs to prove Allah's existence when the Fitrah has already given you His existence on a silver platter. Your soul, your psyche, your intellectual brains of the Ruh automatically gives you this fact. And your brains of the body does not need to function at a high level to know this fact. It could function, it's not gonna, but it doesn't need to. Because intuitively, as Ibn Taymiyyah says, how do you require proofs for a creator when everything around you is a proof of the creator? And in fact, your attempt to find proof is itself a proof. Your curiosity, your brain, your intellect is itself a proof. So how do you want me to find a proof when everything around you is a proof and your curiosity is a proof and the brains you're using to find it is a proof? Where do I need to go outside to find when the proof is all around me and inside of me? So the Fitrah automatically conveys to you, number two, there is a God. And therefore, we're going to come back to this point multiple times. Again, there's going to be some overlap in this class, but inshallah, memorize these templates, and every time we do something more, it'll fit in perfectly. I am not of those who believe that one needs to go down the road of philosophical proofs for the existence of God with atheists. I don't believe this. And I believe that this attempt will always fail. Hardly any philosopher has converted to religion because of these complex proofs. Hardly any philosopher has converted to any religion based upon a detailed discussion of the proofs of the existence of God by some theologian, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Christian, whether they're Jew. It just, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because the problem is not intellectual, the problem is spiritual. Rejecting God is not an intellectual problem, it is theological, spiritual arrogance. Rejecting God doesn't stem that the brain doesn't add up. Rejecting God is that you've covered the brain of the Ruh, which is covering the Fitrah, which is exactly what kufr or the kafir means. Kufr is the covering up. Okay? So, the second point, the Fitrah teaches us the existence of God. The third point, the Fitrah teaches us not only the existence of God, but that God is one. So the Fitrah automatically tells us there must be one supreme being. And that is why every single religion in all of human history at some level is monotheistic. No religion is fully polytheistic. Some religions are partially polytheistic. No religion is fully polytheistic. Even Hinduism believes in one ultimate God, and then a triune of three very powerful gods, and then a plethora of many millions of demigods. At some level, every religion believes in one ultimate God. The Fitrah cannot affirm multiple, co-equal, co-powerful pantheon of gods. The ancient Greeks, they had their Zeus. The ancient Romans, they had their Jupiter. And everybody comes under Zeus, under Jupiter. The Jahili Arabs, they believed in Allah. And then under, they had Allat and Al-Uzza and Manat, not equal to Allah. Min dunillah, the Quran always says, right? وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ آلِهَةً. They took gods under Allah, not along with Allah. Even the Quraysh did not believe in gods with Allah. Nobody did this. No creation in human history. You will say, but how about the Zoroastrians, if you know their theology? How about the Manichaeans? And we say, even they. This is not fully the same. Yes, they do affirm two powerful gods, but eventually one God wins over the other. The God of good wins over the God of evil. They're not fully equal. Ahriman and Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda, the God of good, represented by fire. Ahriman, the God of evil, represented by darkness. So, according to them, there are two powerful gods. Yes, they do say this. They're the only religion that actually even says this. There are two powerful gods. And the God of good creates good, the God of evil creates evil. But even in their theology, eventually the one God will win over the other God, eliminate the other God, and then there will be nothing but peace on earth. That will be judgment, or that will be qiyamah, that will be the end. They're not fully equal. Because the fitrah does not allow the affirmation of co-equal, co-powerful gods at all. So the fitrah affirms there is God, the fitrah affirms there is one God. Clear? Okay, next point, the fitrah. What else does the fitrah affirm? So the fitrah affirms there is the existence of a God. Well, so the fitrah affirms it wants to know about God. Then it affirms the existence of God. Then it affirms God is one. That's three things. Number 4, what can the fitrah tell us about God? Tell me. What can the fitrah tell us? Human nature, cognition. God is powerful. Very good. No religion says my God is a weak God. What else? All-knowing. What else? God wants good for us. Make it even broader than that. What else? God is merciful, compassionate. We see mercy around the creation. What else? Transcendent. We're getting, that's another point. That's valid. So one can say the fitrah automatically affirms that God has noble attributes. And that's why all religions affirm a God that is good and noble, a God that is all-knowing. Does any religion say, oh, my God is weak? Does any religion say, my God doesn't know? All religions affirm a God that has attributes of perfection. True, if you have a pantheon of gods, sometimes some of the gods have negative attributes, but the ultimate God always has all the positive attributes. The fitrah affirms this. So the fitrah affirms that God has divine attributes that are praiseworthy. That is number 4. Number 5 is what our brother said, and that is the fitrah wants a connection with this God. The fitrah yearns for some type of connection, and that connection is established via rituals, via worship, via servitude, by praising God, by submitting to God. Allah says in the Quran, for every nation we have appointed rituals so that they may mention the name of Allah. This is in the Quran. لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ جَعَلْنَا مَنْسَكًا لِيَذْكُرُوا اسْمَ اللَّهِ. For every nation we have appointed rituals. So there are mansak, there are rituals for every single civilization. No civilization has ever had no rituals. And in fact, if you go back on earth, the oldest, human remains and whatnot, you typically find temples, you typically find altars, you typically find rituals they would do. Why are they doing rituals? Because the fitrah yearns for that connection. And finding comfort in worshipping God is something that stems from the fitrah. So this is point number 5. Whoever that God is, even if it's a false God, worshipping a false God will bring you more comfort than not worshipping any God. Worshipping a false God with false rituals is feeding the fitrah something, which is better than not feeding the fitrah at all. It's like, for lack of a better term, feeding somebody just cake and candy and sweets. Very unhealthy. Imagine that's all they ate. Very unhealthy, but it is better than starving to death. So a fitrah that is worshipping incorrectly is infinitely better than a fitrah that is not worshipping at all. Okay, so this is point number 5. And then point number 6, again, we go back to what I said a few minutes ago, of the knowledge that the fitrah conveys is a knowledge of basic morality. I already mentioned this 10 minutes ago. Fitrah tells us that certain things are good and certain things are not good. Sorry to be explicit here, but you're all adults here. We see this constantly in the current climate we find ourselves when it comes to the areas of fahisha, of public fahisha and nudity, of the reality of the porn industry and whatnot. All the time, this reality of the fitrah, knowing something to be wrong, you can't even explain why, but you know it is wrong. The phenomenon of, the porn culture, of OnlyFans, of all of this and that, people are embarrassed and ashamed to admit this. And when they're challenged in public, some of these people that are performers, even if they try to justify it, the rhetoric back and forth, and I've seen a bit of this dialogue online and whatnot, would your father be proud? What are you going to tell your children, etc., etc. And these people that are performers, that are earning a lot of money, they pretend they like it. Deep down inside, sometimes they walk off the set, sometimes they cry, and you can tell they're very embarrassed or nervous in this regard. And almost every single one of these performers that has been honest has eventually come back and said, I made the biggest mistake, we shouldn't have done this. But why? The fitrah. The fitrah is telling them this is not right, it's not noble, it's not healthy, it's not good. Even if their tongue attempts to justify, even if their minds can find mathematical arguments for capitalism and whatnot, the fitrah tells them this is disgusting and immoral. And that knowledge is embedded in the psyche. You can't really prove it intellectually that easily. Supply and demand capitalism, you would be able to justify anything. And that's why, if you want to, we're going to come to this actually, fourth wave feminism, post fourth wave feminism, one of the biggest realities of the contradiction of this trend is how post fourth wave feminism itself has divided sharply over sex work and over prostitution and over pornography. And amongst feminists themselves, there is a civil war going on. Large groups amongst them are correctly saying this is exploitation. And other groups are saying this is empowerment. And intellectually, both can make arguments intellectually. And this shows you the difference between the fitrah's arguments and the arguments of the intellectual body. Because the brain, if you remove the conscience and the fitrah, can easily make an argument for capitalist gain and for the benefit of money and whatnot. But deep down inside, everybody knows this is wrong. So the fitrah therefore teaches us basic universal morality.